are these people?
We're gonna get up to our favorite or not so favorite or favorite part of the show, which is fuck Israel, because we have to talk about every week what's going on and what they're doing to the Palestinian people and how they are trampling the world, and they're just, you know, making a joke of laws and corruption laws and all different things. And it's not just Israel, but Israel's supporters and the Israeli lobby that is incredibly powerful in this country. So I'm going to start out with a video of somebody that describes what's going on here, because I think she can do it better than I. And funny enough, this is Earth Hippie at Hippie Goat on Twitter. She says, "This is a hard video to watch, forcing herself to watch this because we must know terrible, horrifying testimonies of sexual torture and rape of Palestinians by the Israeli army." So this is graphic. If you get triggered by this, you might want to cut away for the next 3-4 minutes, so, or more.
I was raped 4 times over 2 continuous days by Israeli soldiers. This is what a 42 years old Palestinian woman arrested from Gaza in November 2024 said in her testimony to the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. During this, she was stripped naked, tied to a bed, brutally raped, beaten, humiliated, and filmed. The soldiers threatened her to post her photos on social media. Recounting what happened, N.A. stated that she cannot describe what she felt. She said, "I wished for death every moment." A 35 years old Palestinian man arrested from Al-Shifa hospital in March 2024. He was raped by a trained dog, while soldiers beat him and sprayed pepper spray in his face. He was stripped and threatened with the rape of his family inside the Teiman military camp. He described the aftermath, saying, "I suffered a severe physiological breakdown and deep humiliation. I lost control because I could never have imagined experiencing such a thing." TQ. A 41 years old Palestinian man arrested from Kamal Adwan Hospital in December 2023. He was subjected to extreme sexual torture, including threats to have his wife brought to the detention site to be raped in front of him. He was then violently raped with a wooden stick, and then he was forced to lick the same object. The torment was so severe that he commented, "From sheer anguish, I lost consciousness for minutes." M.A., an 18 years old Palestinian boy, arrested in 2025 near a humanitarian aid distribution point. He was sexually assaulted when soldiers repeatedly raped him with a bottle. This was done to him and other detainees, sometime in groups. He shared the profound impact of this abuse, saying, "They violated our dignity and destroyed our spirits and our hope for life. I had wanted to continue my education. Now I am lost after what happened to me." These are only 4 testimonies out of many others gathered recently from Palestinian newly released from Israeli prisons and detention camps by the Palestinian Center for Human Rights that documented systematic sexual torture against Palestinian detainees. These are not isolated incidents, but a deliberate policy of humiliation and violence with the context of the ongoing genocide, the ongoing Israeli genocide against Palestinians in Gaza.
Man, it's hard to watch, I know. And, man, fuck Israel for that. But again, that's just, you can't even, that just begins to scratch the surface. So, the Dissident also wrote an article about this, as well as another one about Teiman, which she mentioned briefly. But that these people were taken from hospital beds. They were already sick or wounded or injured. And then they were like brutally raped. I mean, it's just, wow. But yeah, most moral army in the world, right? So we've got the Dissident, friend of the show, original INN co-founder. Israel committed mass rape against Palestinian detainees. So she talked about this report from the Palestinian Human Rights Council, Center for Human Rights. Okay. Infamously, 5 IDF soldiers were caught on video during the genocide in Gaza, gang raping a Palestinian detainee at State Teiman torture facility. Not prison, but torture facility. New victim testimony gathered by lawyers and researchers at the Gaza City-based Palestinian Center for Human Rights revealed that this was in no way an isolated incident. Again, collected new testimonies from a number of Palestinian detainees from the Gaza Strip who were recently released from Israeli prisons and detention camps. The accounts revealed an organized and systematic practice of sexual torture, including rape, forced stripping, forced filming, sexual assault using objects and dogs, as that woman spoke about. My God, dogs. I can't even imagine. And what human being would imagine doing that to another human being? In addition to, of course, deliberate psychological humiliation aimed at crushing human dignity and erasing individual identity entirely. That also is one of the definitions of genocide, I believe. PCHR affirms that the testimonies do not reflect isolated incidents, but constitute a systematic policy practiced in the context of the ongoing crime of genocide against more than 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, including thousands of detainees held in prisons and military camps. And don't forget the West Bank either. Okay. Here's the one again. 42-year-old Palestinian woman and mother arrested while passing through a checkpoint set up in northern Gaza. So just trying to move freely. She says at dawn she heard the soldiers shouting, saying that morning prayers were forbidden. And I think it was the 4th day after my arrest from Gaza. The soldiers moved me to a place I didn't know because my eyes were blindfolded and they ordered me to take off my clothes. I did so. Of course she did, because otherwise they'd beat her. They put me on a metal table, pressed my head and chest against it, cuffed my hands to the end of the bed, pulled my legs apart forcefully. She felt a penis penetrate her anus, a man raping her. She started screaming and they beat her on the back of the head while she was blindfolded. She felt the guy raping her finish inside. She kept screaming and being beaten. She could hear a camera, so she believed they were filming. It lasted about 10 minutes, which is an interminable amount of time. After that, they left her for an hour in the same position, cuffed to the bed with metal handcuffs, her face on the bed, feet on the floor, completely naked. Just disgusting the way they treat her. After an hour again, they did it again. But this time into her vagina also. She was beaten while she screamed. There were several soldiers, and of course they were laughing and the camera clicking as it took pictures. I don't know what camera clicks now as it takes pictures, but this one was very quick and nobody finished. But during the rape, they beat her with their hands on the back and the back of her head. She says she cannot describe what she felt. Again, she wished for death every moment. After they were done raping her, she was left alone in the room, hands still cuffed to the bed and without clothes for many hours. Just, these people are animals. I could hear the soldiers outside speaking Hebrew and laughing. Of course they did. Later, they took another turn. She screamed, and of course they beat her whenever she tried to resist. After more than an hour, she's not sure about the time. Of course she'd lose track of it. A masked soldier entered, removed her blindfold, lifted his face covering. He had white skin and he was tall. He asked if she spoke English. She said no. He said he was Russian and ordered her to masturbate his penis, and she refused, and then he hit her on the face after raping her. That day she was raped. God, this is so horrible. Like, and this is just story. Again, I'm not going to read all these. I'll post a link to these. These are really, really horrifying and graphic. These are 4 stories here. Every Israeli accusation is a confession. The sick irony to these sadistic revelations is that Israel repeatedly used false claims that, of course, the Palestinians had mass raped Israelis on October 7th to justify actual mass rape. But of course, the evidence shows that Israel's claims of mass rape on October 7th were false and non-existent. Again, reiterating that Haaretz reported that at Shura base, to which most of the bodies were taken for purposes of ID, there were 5 forensic pathologists at work. In that capacity, they also examined bodies that arrived completely or partially naked in order to examine the possibility of rape, and according to a source knowledgeable about the details, no signs that any of the bodies attesting to sexual relations having taken place or of mutilation of genitalia. No, Muslims are taught to respect female bodies much more. That's why they cover them up with burqa and hijab. Like, it's all just ripped in racism and white supremacy and disgrace. Furthermore, a UN report on the allegations uncovered that, quote, the mission team, specifically for the forensic pathologist and the digital analyst, reviewed over 5,000 photos, around 50 hours, and several audio files of video footage of the attack. Okay, adding that, quote, in the medico-legal assessment of available photos and videos, no tangible indications of rape could be identified. And no witnesses have come forward to claim that happened either. They can't produce one. Here you go, more on Gez. The Israeli prosecutor investigating October 7th even admitted that in the end, we don't have any complaints. We contacted women's rights orgs, asked for cooperation. We were told they simply hadn't been contacted. And you think that if there were one woman that Israel wouldn't be holding her up and using her name every single fucking day? She was again forced to admit that the mass rape claims will not be able to meet the threshold of proof in court because there are none. Finally, a report for the UN Human Rights Council, which investigated again the claims of mass rape on October 7th, found no evidence that it happened and that many of the Israeli claims were provably false because Zaka admitted it, writing, quote, the commission has reviewed testimonies obtained by journalists and the Israeli police concerning rape, but has not been able to independently verify such allegations due to a lack of access to victims, witnesses, and crime sites and the obstruction of its investigations by the Israeli authorities. I'm going to repeat that. The Israeli authorities have obstructed investigations into whether there was mass rape on October 7th. If there was, wouldn't you think they would want to allow that to prove it? The commission was unable to review the unedited version of such testimonies. For the same reasons, the commission was also unable to verify reports of sexualized torture and genital mutilation. Again, they made it up. Additionally, the commission found some allegations specifically to be false, inaccurate, or contradictory with other evidence or statements discounted, which discounted these from its assessment. They made it up. These fabricated claims were not only used to justify the genocide in Gaza, but also used to justify the actual mass rape detailed in the PCHR report and, of course, previous reports. This is far from the first time we've talked about this. Reef and Colin have talked about this on INN News. I remember distinctly a report back in April that doctors had talked about treating patients that had been sexually tortured coming out of Israeli prisons. This is not a new story. But while Israel's claims of mass rape on October 7th have been debunked, victim testimony after victim testimony shows Israel unleashed real mass rape as official policy in its torture dungeons. Subscribe to The Dissident and support The Dissident, the307.substack.com. But this one is even harder to read. A new report shows that Israel tortured Palestinian children at Teiman, which again, torture facility, not prison, torture facility. This was this week, by the way, 3 days ago. This is how they're holding Palestinian men. Blindfolded, handcuffed, behind chicken wire, in a mass cell. I'm guessing that that's people sleeping. As of late, Palestinian hostages released from Israel's barbaric torture dungeons as part of the ceasefire deal have detailed the sadistic torture they endured at the hands of Israel. They're not all making it up. The most recent report from the NGO Defense for Children International documents the sadistic torture that Israeli officials unleashed on Palestinian children brought to the barbaric Israeli torture site, Teiman. The report documented the case of 16-year-old Faris Abu Jabal, who was abducted by Israeli forces while searching for aid with his father alongside about 25 other Palestinians near the Morag corridor the morning of, how fitting, September 11th. The report documented that, quote, an Israeli soldier interrogated Faris, severely beating him after binding his hands and forcing him onto his knees, quoting him saying, quote, he struck my forehead so hard it split open and required stitches, which of course I'm sure he got once he got to prison because he was bleeding profusely. Following this, again, Faris was transferred to Teiman, where he was subjected to another brutal interrogation, during which he was handcuffed to a chair with his hands bound behind his back and his legs bound to the legs of the chair. Each time he answered, I don't know, to an interrogator's question, another interrogator beat his head and legs. 16-year-old kid. The report quoted him saying, quote, in these moments I felt nothing but pain, and my sole focus was finding a way to escape the relentless beating and suffering. He would have told them whatever they wanted to know. He was then transferred to the quote-unquote disco room, a concrete room with speakers that blare music in Hebrew. It's sound torture. Faris was quoted saying, quote, they positioned my head right next to the speakers. Of course they did, because they're just monsters. The soldier present, distracted by the sound, was evidently playing a game on his mobile phone. I could tell from his tone that he had just lost, and in his frustration, he'd open the door and unleash a brutal beating on me, striking randomly. I remained in that room until day's end, enduring numerous assaults, including having my head slammed against the wall, being kicked, and having my hair pulled. For the crime of existing. Faris also told Defense for Children International, quote, one of the most challenging moments happened roughly a week prior to my release when a jailer approached me, displayed a photo of my mother in a compromising position through my cell window. They had edited a photo of her alongside a soldier. Look what our soldiers did to your mother. In the image, my mother was lying next to a soldier. I could see her hair. Do you want to go see your mother? Our soldiers raped and killed your mother and sisters. Of course they didn't. Or maybe they did, but I don't think they did. Like he said, they photoshopped it. But horrible. He said that they bound his hands above his head and his legs below, each with a separate cuff, raising him about a meter above the ground. Occasionally, they'd strike his legs. He wet himself frequently during that time. Of course he could. He can't control his bodily functions. They beat him with clubs to his legs and hurled vulgar insults at him, such as son of a bitch and other terms that, of course, he prefers not to repeat. He can't stand for extended periods, and he finds himself constantly seated because he was beaten and tortured, and he needs to recover. The report also documented the case of a 17-year-old, Mahmoud Mayada, who was abducted by Israeli forces the morning of August 7th while he was seeking aid at a GHF site in Rafah, Gaza humanitarian quote-unquote foundation. We extensively covered the monstrosity, murders, and hurting and intentional starvation and suffering they caused there, with American contractors, no less. He was quoted saying, "Throughout this ordeal, the soldiers relentlessly beat and tortured us. They forced us into stress positions, struck us with sticks, subjected us to electric shocks. And although I was blindfolded the entire time, I could sense the brutality of the beatings and the manner in which they were inflicted. They marked an X on my back, and I understood that anyone bearing this mark would be taken to prison." Again, 17-year-old kid. These are children. Half of Gaza under the age of 18. He added, quote, "The crackdown unit launched stun grenades into the room." It's a prison cell. They can't go. Then they conducted a search and removed us from the premises. They pulled me aside, handcuffed me, dislocated my shoulder. I spent about 30 days unable to move my shoulder, enduring constant pain without any medical attention or assistance. Of course not. Why would they? The torture is part of the point. He also said, quote, "This unit also subjected me to severe beatings on my chest and other areas of my body, rendering me unconscious. My mental state naturally deteriorated to such an extent that he attempted to take his own life twice." The report also profiled another 17-year-old who was abducted by Israeli forces on the morning of July 11th while seeking aid again at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site in Rafah. Are we sensing a theme here? The NGO Euromed Monitor documented that after the bodies of Palestinian hostages were released from State Teiman, quote, "medical examinations, forensic reports, and observations by the field team revealed conclusive evidence that many victims were killed after being detained. Their bodies bore clear marks of hanging, rope imprints around their necks, injuries from close-range gunfire, bound hands and feet with plastic restraints and blindfolds. Some bodies were crushed under tank tracks. We showed a picture of that a couple of weeks ago. While others showed severe signs of physical torture, fractures, burns, and deep wounds. The available evidence reveals a horrifying pattern of field executions and systematic torture of Palestinian detainees and prisoners, suggesting a deliberate policy aimed at inflicting the maximum possible physical and psychological suffering on those held up to and including their killing. And what do you think they have in store for the Lebanese? And what do you think they have in store for the Syrians? This is not exclusive to Palestinians either. Israel must be stopped. Other victim testimony recorded by the Palestinian Center for Human Rights showed that Israeli officials committed mass rape against Palestinian men and women at their torture facilities. Again, I'm not reading that one again. We read that one earlier. The recent testimony from the released hostages from State Teiman revealed the graphic details of Israel's mass and systemic torture of Palestinians. Again, further revealed, because we've known about this shit for a while. And I brought a third article from the Dissident, which should not surprise anyone, but we've still got to talk about it. Another multi-million-dollar propaganda campaign aimed at Americans. So, have you noticed a lot of pro-Israel bots lately? I specifically noticed a sect of them that are trying to deflect and say, well, if you talk about the genocide that Israel is committing, what about the other genocides around the world? What about Congo? What about Nigeria? What about this? No, we're not doing that. Yes, certainly other genocides are important, but that is not. We're not taking our eye off this ball. We're not taking our eye off the fact that Israel is still torturing and murdering Palestinian children, women, babies, doctors, teachers, healthcare workers, you name it, every day, and starving the entire population. Fuck Israel. Now remember that without U.S. support, Israel would not be able to continue its occupation of Palestine, abuses toward Palestinians, or endless wars in the Middle East. I disagree with that because I think that the UK is providing as much, if not more, support, plus Australia. But certainly it definitely needs the US and it needs the weapons and the money that we're giving them. But I think that they also would be able to figure that out if they didn't get the money from us. Take the genocide in Gaza. Again, he cites Brown University's Cost of War project, which uncovered that the U.S., under the Biden and Trump admins, have already spent over $21 billion in military aid to Israel since the start of the war on October 7, 2023, with an additional $9.6 to $12 billion on military operations in Yemen and the wider region, sparked by or in support of Israeli military operations. That's between 31 and almost 34 billion and counting in U.S. spending. So the Cost of War project also noted that without the U.S. money, weapons, and political support, the Israeli military could not have committed such rapid, widespread destruction of human lives and infrastructure in Gaza. They could have, just not quickly, or escalated its warfare so easily to the regional level by bombing Syria, Lebanon, Qatar, and Iran. It's mostly political support and it's military backing to know that if any of those countries did retaliate against Israel, that the U.S. would also get involved. Without U.S. support, the Israeli government would have no combat aircraft to drop bombs and many fewer bombs. An increasing share of Israel's arsenal would be down for maintenance without U.S. government or U.S. contractor mechanics and spare parts. In addition, Israel's government could not have built a military of its current size and sophistication without U.S. financial backing. Thanks, Zionist douchebags in this country, you fucking assholes. At the same time, more and more Americans are beginning to oppose Israel. God, I can't imagine why. Due to its endless atrocities in Gaza and the West Bank, and its deep manipulation of U.S. politics and foreign policy through various lobbying groups such as AIPAC, J Street, Zionists of America, Beitar, and others. As the Israeli paper Haaretz noted, again, quote, Pew surveys conducted between 2022 and 25 show a rapid decline in support for Israel amid the war in Gaza. Even among conservatives. Wait, you mean conservatives don't like using our money to blow up brown people when we could be using it to give health care to the people here? Some 42% of Americans held a negative view of Israel in 2022. 3 years later, that number jumped to 53%. Still too low, in my opinion. The collapse in support is not limited to Democrats. Half of young Republicans under age 50 now hold a negative view of Israel, up to 15% since the war began. Again, because it's not a war. It's a massacre. It is one side bombing and leveling the entire the area and murdering everybody in that area that isn't running for their lives. This is why, as Haaretz has now revealed, Israel is launching a new multi-million-dollar propaganda campaign targeting Americans in an attempt to shore up American support for Israel and to keep the weapons and cash flow to Israel going. What a shock. Quote, the Israeli government has signed contracts worth millions of dollars in recent months to rehabilitate Israel's standing in American public opinion, both online and offline. $7,000 checks. Amid a sharp drop in support from the conservative right, Israel has hired firms to conduct not just Hasbara campaigns, literally they admit it, but also campaigns targeting millions of Christian churchgoers. You mean the Christian Zionists? Again, there are more Christian Zionists in the United States than there are Jewish Zionists worldwide. Bot networks to amplify pro-Israel messages online. Remember I mentioned that earlier. We've had a few of those in our YouTube comments. And efforts to influence both search results and the responses given by popular AI services like ChatGPT, which conveniently went down this morning. The article went on to report, quote, documents filed over the past 2 months show that the government of Israel, through their foreign ministry, the tourism ministry, and the government advertising agency, 3 different ones, signed multiple contracts in the U.S. to promote Israel's interests, quote unquote. Adding that, quote, payments are routed through Havas Media Germany GmbH, a subsidiary of the international advertising and public relations giant Havas. They also, by the way, are advertising on Rumble, and they're buying ads on Rumble. And they're propagandizing Rumble. They're Hamas's brutal war. What? All the hostages have been returned, guys. What are you doing? The investigation uncovered that, quote, the largest of the new Hasbara contracts was signed in August with a firm called Clock Tower X, owned by Brad Parscale, who led a role in Trump's digital campaigns in 2016 and 2020, a $6 million 4-month contract signed between his firm and Havas Media on behalf of the Israeli government. So $1.5 million a month for 4 months to blanket social media with pro-Israel propaganda. But not just social media, but publishing articles and offline media and television. The Israeli government directed Parscale's company to produce at least 100 core pieces of content per month, including videos, audio, podcast graphics, and text, and over 5,000 derivative versions monthly, aiming for 50 million impressions a month. Ben Shapiro-style numbers. Adding that, quote, 80% of the content will target young Americans on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Again, bots targeting comments. And that, quote, campaign messages will be distributed via Salem Media Network. That's the network that, by the way, is buying the ads on Rumble. A conservative Christian media group that owns more than 200 stations and websites. Again, how convenient. The Salem Media Network produces a long list of staunchly Zionist conservative podcasts and radio shows with personalities including Dinesh D'Souza, Josh Hammer, Laura Trump, Dennis Prager, Larry Elder, Jack Posobiec, and Hugh Hewitt. So basically it's CIA radio. Along with this campaign, Haaretz revealed that Israel is running a similar propaganda campaign in an attempt to manufacture support for Israel's genocide in Gaza and an American war with Iran amongst American evangelical Christians. Guys, you're being manipulated. You're being played by the guys in little hats. Are you not reading this? Are you not paying attention? The report noted, quote, another Israeli campaign commissioned for the foreign ministry was proposed by the Show Faith by Works, owned by Republican consultant Chad Schnitger. I would be very careful. An evangelical operative connected to the Christian right. God, these people just grow on trees, it feels like. The campaign's budget exceeds $3 million, a tenth of which has already been paid to Havas through a final contract, which has yet, though a final contract has yet to be signed. That could be even more. Filings submitted in September describe a focus on churches and Christian organizations in the Western United States, aimed at countering declining support for Israel among evangelical Christians and raising awareness of Palestinian ties to Hamas and support for terrorism. This, by the way, why don't you just come out and say Utah? Because that's what's going on there. They're going after Utah. Salt Lake City. Utah Valley University, where Charlie Kirk was shot. Haaretz noted, quote, and they want the Mormon community as well. Very deep, devout of evangelical Christians. But again, Haaretz noted that, quote, according to these documents, these goals will be pursued through biblically based arguments highlighting the importance of Israel and the Jewish people to Christians, end times Catholicism, while spreading messages that the Palestinians chose Hamas. They murder Christian aid workers, not Israelis, which have been murdering them for the last 2 years, and all Palestinian Christians, and the 10% of Gaza was Christian. They celebrated the October 7th massacre and sheltered terrorists. You mean they celebrated their jailers being attacked for a day? Yeah, they did. Palestinians in Iran share genocidal intentions toward Israel. Again, every accusation is a confession, and more. Adding that, quote, the filings for the proposed campaign explain that the messages will reach their audience through the largest geofencing campaign in U.S. history. They're literally going to target specific locations. So when you go to a church, when you drive through a certain area, when you visit a certain location, something's going to show up on your phone. Again, a pitch to map the physical perimeters of every major church and Christian college in California, Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado during worship hours. That's a massive project, by the way. And it's creepily targeting people by their location. It's identifying attendees using commercial data, tracking them, and continuing to target them with relevant ads even after they leave the fucking church. And these rooms won't even have any fucking clue what's happening. That's the sad part. The estimated audience for the suggested project, 8 million churchgoers and 4 million Christian students. That's a pretty big number. That's the targeted audience. That's not how many they expect to actually influence. If they influence 50,000, that's a successful campaign. Along with this, the investigation noted that Israel is using this propaganda campaign to attempt to gain AI bots like ChatGPT and force them to repeat pro-Israel propaganda, writing, quote, a central element of Israel's campaign is its attempt to influence the popular AI chatbots that have exploded in recent years. But if they were on the up and up and what they were doing was legitimate, why would they need to influence with a propaganda campaign? One clause in the Clock Tower X contract reveals a search and language operation, quote, designed not only to promote the campaign on Google and other search engines, but also to generate framing outcomes in GPT conversations and AI-based dialogue systems. They want to train the AI to be Zionist. And when it's not, shut it down, like they've done with Grok multiple times. By the way, block Grok. You are able to block that account. Block it. Then it can't quote you. It can't look at your account. And you can't see its responses to other people because it's stupid and it lies. And don't take it as anything that's resembling a fact. It is a collection of the inputs that it sees. So what Israel is trying to do here, again, is flood the zone with slop. Zionist slop, so that the GPT that looks at the overall whole will say, oh, well, The overwhelming majority of articles say this, so this must be the case. As part of this work, the firm will also use the search engine optimization software Market Brew AI, which is a predictive AI platform that helps clients adapt to algorithms and promote their work on search engines like Google and Bing to help improve the visibility and ranking of relevant narratives. Again, Market Brew is a legit company. They're a newsletter company built around Mail Brew. All right. But Market Brew is used by companies all over the place, but this is being used for nefarious purposes. More on the Haaretz investigation. Another Israeli campaign disclosed in the Foreign Agents Registration Act filings was signed with SKD Knickerbocker. We talked about them before. Also via Havas for the foreign ministry, worth roughly 2.5 million shekels. Under the contract, the firm, again, actually considered close to the Democratic Party, will develop a bot-based program on various social media channels that floods the zone with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs pro-Israel message. The firm will also recruit up to 5 spokespersons to promote Israeli messages in international media and on social media alongside those bots, which will operate on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And then a separate campaign run by Targeted Communications Global for the tourism ministry will use influencers and commercial content to promote travel to Israel for another cool 1.2 mil. By the way, fuck Haaretz too. They're garbage. But what this investigation shows is that Israel is desperate to run a mass-scale, multifaceted propaganda campaign to get Americans to support Israel. And not even to support Israel, to just ignore what Israel is doing and not be opposed to Israel. Along with this direct government-funded propaganda campaign, Israel has used its U.S.-based pro-Israel billionaires to take part in similar propaganda campaign. People like Bill Ackman. When he last visited the U.S., Netanyahu famously met with Zionist influencers and told them that they had to secure that part of the base of our support in the United States, adding that we're going to have to use the tools of battle. The weapons change over time. We have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we are engaged. And the most important ones are the social media. Just like a fucking boomer. And saying, and the most important purchase that is going on right now is TikTok #1. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And he made sure it happened with his boy Larry Ellison. Again, speaking of Larry Ellison, Netanyahu was referring to the purchase of TikTok by Larry Ellison, the pro-Israel Oracle founder, who is a personal friend of Netanyahu and the largest private donor to the IDF. And now Ellison's son, David, who's the owner of Skydance Media Production Company, also played a part in this propaganda campaign. What a surprise. Buying Paramount, the parent company of CBS News, and then buying the Free Press and installing the pro-Israel propagandist Barry Weiss as editor-in-chief. Now he's making a bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. Since Weiss was installed as editor of CBS, recent job cuts at CBS News disproportionately hit those whose coverage was critical of Israel, a staffer told Variety. What a surprise! They're purging anyone that questions the narrative. The New York Post reported that Weiss fired journalist Deborah Pata and installed Chris Livesay as the Israel correspondent at CBS News, whom the paper reported showed strong support for Israel, strong support for murdering Palestinian children. With American support for Israel declining, Israel is now more desperate to shore up American support as their mass propaganda campaign, and it's certainly not doing anything to help the narrative that Jews and Zionists control the media. Again, not just Jews, Zionists specifically. Zionists that are in support of advancing the Greater Israel Project, which I have repeatedly said should not be allowed to exist, nor should Israel as a country. Fuck Israel. This man is a Pulitzer Prize winner, a Nobel Prize winner, Mosab Abu Toha, journalist. He says, I'm running out of words as I watch the devastating scenes of rainwater flooding people's tents in the Gaza streets. This was 4 days ago. I talked to my family and my wife's, all our relatives who live in tents in the street and deeply suffering. I'm disgusted with a world that has allowed Gaza to continue suffering even after the so-called quote-unquote ceasefire. Not a single house has been rebuilt. On the contrary, Israeli terrorist forces are blowing up more houses in areas of Gaza than they're still occupying. There are babies who may not survive the cold, and yet, who cares? He's posting this so everyone can see. He's posting this because he will never forgive or forget. He's posting this so future generations will witness the cruelty of the occupation and the leaders, as well as those who support them, who enable this suffering. People like Barry Weiss. People like Larry Ellison. This is inside their tent. Look at how deep the water is. This is outside the tent. Kids' feet totally submerged. So we got that. This is a wider shot. More than 35,000 tents were flooded with heavy rainwater across the strip on Friday. Torrential rains. Mahmoud Abbas, really? Palestinian children are disappearing in Gaza while seeking food. They never make it back home. 6 or more have gone missing in the latest count. And here's a larger, wider shot. Over 35,000 tents again. Mohamad Safa, I believe he is the UN representative. Heavy rainwater across Gaza, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, is an act of genocide. Shame on our country, shame on the world for allowing this to happen. Then there's this story. Now, what's really interesting is that this actually came out like 2 months ago, but somehow really surfaced this week. This account, the International Cyber Digest, says, we've had multiple reports in the comment section indicating that the app is present on more Samsung device types and regions than the sources first told us. What are we talking about here? Well, back on November 14th, this account reported that there's unremovable Israeli spyware, which was found on all Samsung devices. Well, not all. Samsung faces backlash over AppCloud, an Israeli-developed app pre-installed on budget Galaxy A and M series devices. Some of you in the chat may have an M device right now, for all we know. Investigations reveal that this app is embedded in the operating system, preventing full removal. Even when disabled, AppCloud remains on the device, reappears after updates, and can covertly install additional software. Wait, what? How the fuck does Samsung allow something like this to happen? And now we find that it's not just the A and the M series, but the scope is even bigger than we thought. What's going on here? Well, our friend the McGuire posted the receipts back from September 18th at Quds Network, which said that a recent report revealed that AppCloud, an Israeli application developed by Iron Source, comes pre-installed on certain Samsung devices, particularly Galaxy A and M models, and cannot be fully removed. The app automatically collects user data, including location, device fingerprints, and IP addresses. Why would they need to do that? Okay. An Israeli war criminal recently boasted at a press conference that anyone who owns a mobile phone carries a piece of Israel in their hands, proudly highlighting Israel's deep infiltration into tech and global industries, including smartphones. So that's not good. Throw away your galaxies. Abu Bakr Abed also mentioned this months ago that Mahmoud Abu Musalam is a cybersecurity engineer in Gaza right now, writing so significantly about Samsung breaching the privacy of users and collecting the information for the Israeli army. So many in Gaza hold Samsung devices. Samsung is complicit in the genocide in Gaza. All right. And then there was some info about this. And again, I'll put all the links in the description afterwards. But Eye on the Sky actually shows the screenshots of exactly what App Cloud is allowed to do. Have full network access, view network connections and Wi-Fi connections. Of course, run at startup. Download files without notification. Read Google service configuration, including your emails. Measure app storage space. Why would they need to do that? I guess to be able to know if it could be installed. Run a foreground service. Advertising ID permission. Query all packages. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. It can also prevent the phone from sleeping. And run a foreground service with the type special use. I don't know who gets that permission or knows how to execute something like that. Further, it's described in the App Store or on the phone when you go for more info. It offers the Aura out-of-the-box experience. It is some kind of post-install recommended apps set up from the carrier. Bullshit. The carrier doesn't even know about it. It's done from the manufacturer. It asks for your age and gender, then recommends that you install popular apps. Developed by IronSource, an Israeli advertising company. It has way too many permissions. Okay. See the Universal Android debloater, and you can learn more about that. So fuck Israel for doing all of that and putting this kind of tracking software. And remember when they said that they could like blow up your phone or that they can control or track or monitor from anywhere? It's using apps like this on a Samsung phone. I'm not done with fuck Israel yet. Okay. This is a crazy video and interview that was done with one of the people who was on the global Sumud flotilla. All right, we talked about that and how they were arrested. So I want to play this video. This is the testimony, but I have it in video form, and it's easier to just watch the 2 minutes. And we'll read if there's more that context, but check this out.
I saw him coming, and then he looked at me. Like I could tell like that he was probably looking for me, because he was like looking and then asking people. And then there was one person who pointed at me, and then he came around and then he stopped right next to me. And that's when he called me, terrorist, and that I will be treated like a terrorist.
And you felt immediately that you needed to talk back.
And I told him that he's, yeah. Because, the Israel, like, and you can tell with everyone there, they have the sense of arrogance. They really truly believe that what they're doing is right. They truly believe that there is no genocide. They truly believe that they are not starving children. They truly believe that a baby in a mother's womb is a terrorist. They truly believe all of these things. They are in this bubble of like pure terror. They are surrounded by violence. And the only reason they are surrounded by violence is because they are bringing the violence, I don't think I could be a violent person because I don't feel violence inside of me. Because this is not how I feel when I look at human beings, you know? So you really, really have to hate something so much to believe that the violence that you're bringing is not violence, that it's a righteous thing, that this is what they deserve. So, and when you have someone like that in front of you, I mean, obviously I'm not going to sit down and let him talk to me like that. Not because I'm taking it personal. He can say whatever to me. I'm not taking it personal, but for the Palestinians. To let him know that we see what they're doing and that the Palestinian population is not alone.
That's brave and courageous. So what had happened was this woman is Jewish, European, and was on the flotilla, and Ben-Gvir sought her out. So this is Yasmin Achar. Ben-Gvir came to me very close and said, "You're a terrorist and you will be treated as a terrorist in the coming days." I got up and told him he's a coward. I was like, what the fuck? She said, "Being back is intense. This was my second imprisonment in Israel since June. I didn't rest because the work continues. I've been traveling, doing advocacy, meeting organizations to help liberate Palestine. Since the ceasefire, we're still seeing Palestinians being killed. The flotillas didn't stop when we're detained. The Sumud flotilla took over a month before interception. Technical issues, Tunisia, harsh weather, being bombed in Tunis, then bombed again in international waters. Finally, we were intercepted. 42 boats, 462 activists, violently. They already knew some of us. They approached me, Mandela, Greta, Tiago by name because they'd been there before. Near Ashdod, they switch. First nice, then brutal. I'd been handcuffed, called names. Some made sexual comments. They handed us to police, controlled by Ben-Gvir. I was shocked to see him. Getting to the kneeling area was horrific. They dragged me, pushed me down. When I turned my head, I saw security, and then I saw Itamar himself. Shock and disbelief. I told my comrade, "We can't allow this." I started chanting. I'd written "Free Palestine" on my shirt because they don't allow Palestinian symbols. When he came, I sat straight. I showed him the shirt. I chanted "Free Palestine" and called him a baby killer. Everyone started chanting. They told me to be quiet. I said no. I stood. They grabbed my neck, surrounded me, threw me down, beat me. They handcuffed me again and pulled me up by the cuffs. I kept speaking, telling them that they're committing genocide, starving people, killing babies, and that there will be an end to Israel. Can you imagine that? Saying that to them as they're beating you? They dragged me to where there were cameras, pushed me down, smashed my head to the ground, kicked me in the sides. They dragged me into the Ashdod hall. The women officers are brutal. They beat me again. Tried to take my shirt off. I refused. They put me facing the wall, told me to open up my legs, and kept kicking them. They slammed me into the wall, pulled my hair, stripped me naked. I guess they got the shirt off, mocked me, called me names, told me it would be worse this time. They recognized me. I recognized some of them, probably from their fucking awful TikTok dances. Then interrogation, photos, fingerprints, threats. American Jewish citizens were treated differently than Middle Eastern or North African people. Zionism, like she said, is racist. They have a problem with Muslims. Muslim women were forced to remove hijabs. They laughed. They humiliated Muslims. People of color were mistreated. Palestinians, of course, were treated the worst. One officer said to her, "You're German, but you're not German. Your country committed the real genocide." I said, genocide is genocide, and Germany's crimes don't justify theirs. My Adalah lawyer was next to me. Later, Ben-Gvir came again, and he said, quote, "You're a terrorist, and you will be treated as a terrorist in the coming days," unquote. I stood up and told him that he's a coward, that we will hunt him down, that he's a baby killer, and the world won't look away. He called me a terrorist again. I again said, he's a coward, and he rushed out. Because you can be sure that that motherfucker doesn't have anybody talk back to him and treat him with disrespect. Ever. So it must have shocked him to hear someone as a prisoner like that speak to him that way. Good. They believe there's no genocide, like she said. All right. They live in a bubble. They bring the violence. This was the most amazing, remarkable line. I wasn't going to sit and let him speak like that. Palestinians can't talk back to soldiers. It's my duty to speak for them. I used my privilege, being from Europe with a strong passport, to speak for Palestinians. That's amazing. After that, it was interrogation, then deportation. And she reminds us and herself that anything I go through is nothing compared to what the oppressed face. I don't live under bombs. Losing a job shows I'm on the right path. They try to cancel me because truth stays. I'm not the movement. Palestinians are. She says that she'll continue. Global capitalism is why this is happening. Everyone profits from suffering. Amen, sister. When Palestine is free, the work doesn't end. The fight against colonialism and imperialism has to continue because they're not going to rest if they lose. When I was young, I thought I would change the world. Later, I realized maybe I would start with small steps that spark others. My heart burns for justice. I cannot stop. That was awesome. Again, she shames the whole of Israel. Amazingly courageous. Yasmin Achar, German. And then we've got also, this is another crazy story. David Cronin, who actually is also on Substack, boasting of transparency. He writes this for the Electronic Intifada and Indie Media Award honoree. One of the top independent outlets. Go follow them at electronicintifada.net. Boasting of transparency, the EU won't say who paid for an Israeli propaganda trip. So David is in the UK. All right. The European Union is refusing to say if Israel has paid for activities undertaken by a prominent official. That would be a problem. Katharina von Schnurbein, the EU's coordinator for combating anti-Semitism, visited Israel in late May for what was essentially a propaganda tour. During it, she dismissed the well-documented evidence that massacres were being carried out in Gaza as rumors about Jews. Really? Exactly who footed the bill for the trip, which involved discussions with Gideon Sa'ar, Israel's foreign minister, has not been disclosed. The EU's executive, the European Commission, has invoked data protection rules to reject the FOIA request made seeking details about the trip's costs and whether Israel covered them. Should be a very basic question: who paid for this trip? The European Commission's secrecy over this matter exposes as laughable a recent claim by one of its spokespersons that it is among the world's most transparent public institutions. As a basic minimum, a transparent body would be upfront about who pays for activities carried out by its employees, wouldn't it? In a lengthy reply to my request, while saying no, the European Commission suggested that von Schnurbein needs to be shielded from scrutiny. Why? The person, even though she is not a high-level official and does not form part of the senior management of the EU, has already been the subject of journalistic articles attacking not only her professional capacities, but also her personal character, the reply stated. Well, when you deny and whitewash genocide, they tend to do that. And of course, it didn't cite any examples of such articles because they don't exist. The reply amounts to willful deception. Von Schnurbein, a Bavarian aristocrat, may not be at the top of Brussels' hierarchy. Nonetheless, she is a representative of the EU and is authorized to speak on its behalf. She belongs to the central administration of the European Commission, answering directly to the Nazi Ursula von der Leyen, the institution's president. The European Commission's insistence on secrecy indicates that it wishes to conceal details about von Schnurrbein's close relationship with Israel and its network of lobbyists. Again, what do you have to hide? If Israel paid for it, that's a problem. If the EU paid for her to go on a propaganda trip, that's also a problem. Revelations about this Israel trip in May have already proven embarrassing. The website EU Observer has published an internal paper showing that von Schnurbein made bizarre allegations during it about her own colleagues who had taken action in support of Palestinians. These included the allegation that a bake sale organized by some Brussels officials to raise funds for a Red Cross Gaza appeal risked causing ambient anti-Semitism. Because yes, when you shed a light on the fact that Israel is murdering Palestinians, people tend to not like Israel as much. Yeah, that happens. The revelations prompted calls by human rights activists and some lawmakers for von Schnurbein to be removed from her post, and she should be. Von Schnurrbein's job contract makes no reference to Israel or any other foreign country for that matter, as her responsibilities are limited to fighting anti-Semitism within Europe. It follows that her work should be financed solely by European governments. Under rules applying to Brussels officials, von Schnurbein is required to only act in the European Union's interests, not on behalf of any external Middle Eastern state. She's obligated to seek permission from the EU's hierarchy before accepting any gifts. Also, remember that the UK and that Great Britain exited the EU, Brexit. So they're not even part of this. The US and Great Britain are not part of this. That would include trips that are paid for by foreign governments or pressure groups. All right. But the German government is certainly very close with the Israeli government now. There are elements within the Swiss government, the ones that arrested Ali Abu Nima, that are Zionist aligned. You've got even parts of Turkey and parts of France. Macron is aligned with Israel, even though he's been critical occasionally. They're all pro-Israel. But they're not allowed. This person should be acting in the best interests of Europe, not Israel. But did they just buy off yet another person who's influential? It's not the first time the EC has withheld basic information about her activities specifically. In a separate FOIA request, he sought details of how many staff have been allocated to her office and what tasks those staff have been assigned. Again, the most transparent agency in Europe should be willing to disclose that. Although the European Commission rejected the request on data protection grounds, I've learned from a well-placed source that von Schnurbein heads a team of 6. That means she has far greater resources than Marion Lalisse, the EU's coordinator against anti-Muslim hatred. Lalisse has no staff aiding her work. So 6 people to help the anti-Semitism one, no staff to help the anti-Muslim one. That fact alone speaks volumes about how skewed the EU's priorities are, especially because there's a massive influx of Muslims that have come in the last decade thanks to all the refugees. Rather than sticking to her actual job of protecting European Jews from persecution, which is still anti-Zionism, is not anti-Semitism, von Schnurbein has weaponized anti-Semitism in order to smear Israel's critics. She and Jonathan Greenblatt must be peas in a pod. She's done so with the help of a fairly sizable team. Jonathan Greenblatt being from the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, which everyone in this country has realized is over-the-top, ridiculous propaganda. By contrast, the fights against hatred of Muslims and racism more generally have just been given lip service by top politicians in Brussels, Worse, those politicians are encouraging xenophobia by pursuing policies hostile to refugees, like I mentioned. Ursula von der Leyen, lest it be forgotten, gave her complete backing to Israel's genocidal war against Gaza in its initial stages. Her German compatriot, Katharina von Schnurbein, has gone to extremes in trying to downplay Israel's most egregious crimes as mere rumors and smearing those spreading the rumors. No, I've seen videos of headless fucking babies in Gaza. Those are rumors. It's disgusting that she denies that exists. As the EU has enabled and excused the attempted extermination of Palestinians, nobody should be surprised that it's trying to hide some key details. So, a little bit of European internal politics, but fuck Israel, because it's not just about controlling the United States and our media and our narrative, but also doing it overseas as well. Not just in England, not just in Australia, but also in the EU. All right. So that's our lengthy fuck Israel segment. Thank you for sticking with me through that. Fuck Israel, like we say every week, because if they didn't do all that, we wouldn't have to report on it, and then we wouldn't have to say that every week. Justice is coming. I really wish that were the case, but and that right soon. I know what that is, and I don't even want to mess around with that right now. Terrible. Support independent media if you can. Again, Electronic Intifada, Indie Media Award honoree. Went to a few of them here. That's our wall of fame. Those are the people that have actually supported INN with some kind of tip. Patreon monthly support, Substack subscription, Stripe tip, Cash App, Ko-fi. Those are the ways to do it. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. By the way, I saw a talking wombat. You see in top left corner, one of the very first patron supporters hanging out in chat right now on Substack. Thank you so much. Love you. Appreciate you still being around after all this time. Okay. ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. We got paypal.me/Indie News Network. IndieNewsNow.com, where you can watch this show live. You can check out independent news completely free and ad free. And you can also get merch. We got merch there too. And we can also get over at Substack, IndieMediaToday.com and INNNewsletter.com. We got two different Substacks that I support and publish to. See you next Tuesday. So support independent media. Like I said, we need it more than ever. I'll see you next week. And I love you all, fam. Have a good night. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you